For a marriage that looked completely normal from the outside, the ending of Margaret Qualley and Jack Antonoff's relationship happened with almost no warning, and then suddenly fans were staring at deleted wedding photos, a missing wife at Taylor Swift's wedding, and headlines asking what could possibly have gone wrong. Margaret Qualley and Jack Antonoff have separated after nearly 3 years of marriage, and the timing alone was enough to send the internet into detective mode. But before we get into the rumors, there is one thing that needs to be made absolutely clear: there is no confirmed cheating story here. In fact, Margaret's representative directly denied the infidelity and trust issue narratives that began circulating after the split, saying those reports were categorically untrue and that the relationship had been based on respect and partnership. So the real story is not some secret affair we can pretend to know about. It is the much more complicated story of two successful people whose relationship apparently reached a point where marriage was no longer working, while the public was left trying to understand what happened from the tiny pieces they could actually see. Margaret and Jack first got together in 2021, and their relationship moved surprisingly quickly. By May 2022, they were engaged, and in August 2023 they got married in New Jersey in a ceremony that brought together some very recognizable names from Hollywood and music. Taylor Swift was among the famous guests, which made sense because Antonoff has been one of Swift's closest creative collaborators for years. At the time, everything looked incredibly happy. Margaret had gone from one of Hollywood's rising actresses to the wife of one of the music industry's most successful producers, and Jack had found a partner who seemed completely comfortable in his world. For almost 3 years, there was no major public scandal surrounding their marriage. Then came July 2026, and suddenly the picture looked completely different. The first major clue came from Taylor Swift and Travis Kelce's wedding celebrations in New York. Jack attended the event with his sister Rachel Antonoff, but Margaret was not there. Normally, that might mean absolutely nothing. Celebrities miss events all the time, especially when schedules are complicated. But this was not just any wedding. Taylor had attended Margaret and Jack's wedding in 2023, and Jack is one of Swift's longtime collaborators and friends, so his appearance without his wife immediately caught people's attention. Soon after, fans began noticing changes on Margaret's Instagram. Wedding photos featuring Jack were removed, and her social media identity changed as well. None of those things, by themselves, proves what happened inside a marriage. But when several clues appear at the same time, the internet rarely waits for an official explanation. Reports then emerged that Margaret and Jack had separated after hitting a rough patch in their relationship, with one source telling Us Weekly that Margaret initiated the separation and that the couple had been dealing with difficulties involving their schedules and distance. Another report described the marriage as having been rocky for some time. Those reports are claims from unnamed sources, not statements from Margaret or Jack themselves, and that distinction matters. Because almost immediately, another part of the story exploded online. Rumors began suggesting that infidelity or trust problems had caused the breakup. And this is where Margaret's team stepped in. Her representative rejected those claims directly, saying there were no trust issues and no infidelity, and stressing that the couple still had deep love and care for one another. The statement also pushed back against people speaking publicly about a private marriage, essentially reminding everyone that the people selling details to the press were not necessarily people who actually knew what happened between them. That response changed the tone of the story. Instead of a simple celebrity breakup turning into a cheating scandal, we were left with something much less satisfying but probably much closer to reality: a marriage that ended without the public being given the full reason why. And honestly, that may be exactly what Margaret and Jack want. We live in an era where people expect celebrities to explain everything. If someone deletes wedding pictures, fans want to know why. If someone attends a major event without their spouse, people immediately start connecting dots. If two people separate after looking happy for years, everyone wants a villain. But sometimes there isn't one. Sometimes two people can care about each other and still realize their relationship is no longer working. And Margaret's representative went even further by saying there was nothing outside of respect and partnership in the relationship. That makes the situation especially interesting because the internet had already built a much darker explanation before Margaret's side officially responded. The breakup itself was confirmed on July 8, 2026, just days after the Taylor Swift wedding became the center of the speculation. And only a short time later, Margaret was photographed back at work on the set of the upcoming remake of Possession in New Jersey. It was her first public appearance since news of the separation became public, and the image was almost strangely fitting. Instead of appearing at another celebrity event or addressing the rumors directly, she was working. She is starring in the new horror film in the role originally played by Isabella Gianni, and the production represents the next stage of her career at a moment when her personal life has suddenly become a much bigger public story. Meanwhile, Jack has also been seen out in New York, including a recent dog walk with a friend, appearing to be focused on life after the marriage. His band Bleachers has also reportedly removed the song Margaret from its current set list, which fans naturally noticed because the song was written about Qualley. Again, that does not tell us what happened between them, but it does show how much of their relationship had become intertwined with Antonoff's creative life. Their relationship was not just something that happened privately. Margaret became part of the world surrounding his music, and Jack became part of the public story surrounding her career. That is why the breakup feels bigger than a random celebrity split. Margaret Qualley has spent the past several years becoming one of Hollywood's most talked about young actresses. Her career has moved through projects like Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, Made, The Substance, and other major productions, while Jack Antonoff has built an enormous career behind the scenes as a producer, songwriter, and member of Bleachers. He has worked with some of the biggest names in modern pop music, including Taylor Swift, Lana Del Rey, and Lorde, making him one of those people whose influence is enormous even when he isn't the person standing at the center of the stage. Together, Margaret and Jack were a very modern celebrity couple, an actress whose profile was rising quickly and a musician and producer whose professional influence was already enormous. Their wedding itself reflected that world, bringing together major stars from both entertainment industries. But now, barely 3 years later, that chapter is over. And perhaps the most revealing detail is how little either of them has actually said. There has been no dramatic public interview where Margaret explains everything. There has been no long statement from Jack laying out his side. There has been no confirmed affair to point at and say, that was the reason. Instead, there are reports of a rough patch, changes on social media, separate appearances, and a representative telling everyone that the more damaging rumors are simply not true. That leaves fans with an uncomfortable reality: we may never know the private reason this marriage ended. And maybe we are not supposed to. The public saw the wedding. We saw the red carpets. We saw the photographs. We saw Margaret become part of Jack's world and Jack become part of hers. But none of that means we saw the marriage itself. We only saw the parts they chose to show us. The separation also comes at an interesting point in Margaret's career. Rather than disappearing from public life, she has gone straight back to work, filming Possession, and continuing to build a career that has already taken her far beyond the Hollywood daughter label that followed her early on. She is Andie MacDowell's daughter, but Margaret has increasingly established herself through performances that have made her one of the most interesting young actresses working today. Jack, meanwhile, remains deeply involved in music and production, with a career that continues independently of the marriage. So despite all the rumors, the available evidence points to something much simpler: two people who were married, who apparently experienced serious enough problems to separate, and who are now moving forward separately while trying to keep the private details private. And that is probably the most important thing to remember when looking at this story. The internet wants a shocking explanation. It wants cheating, betrayal, secret messages, and a villain. But Margaret's representative specifically rejected that version. The confirmed facts are already enough to tell an interesting story. Margaret Qualley and Jack Antonoff started dating in 2021, became engaged in 2022, married in August 2023, and separated in July 2026. Jack attended Taylor Swift's wedding without Margaret shortly before the separation became public. Margaret removed wedding-related content from her Instagram and changed her handle. Reports said the marriage had been struggling, while her representative rejected claims of infidelity and trust issues. And now both of them appear to be continuing with their lives and careers. Maybe someday Margaret or Jack will explain exactly what happened. Maybe they will never do it. And if they never do, the public will have to accept that some celebrity stories simply do not come with a final confession. Sometimes the most honest ending is just two people deciding they cannot continue the same way. For now, Margaret is back on a movie set, Jack is back in New York, and the marriage that once brought their two worlds together is over. No secret affair has been proven. No dramatic betrayal has been confirmed. What happened behind closed doors belongs to the two people who are actually inside that marriage. And perhaps that is the one part of this story that deserves to stay private.